Thank you all. Melanie and I are really happy to be here today to share a bit with you about how we manage knowledge at Doctolib. But first...
Hi everyone, my name is Melanie. I'm a software engineer at Doctolib. I work in the video consultation teams, and this is my first conference, so be nice with me.
And I'm Alex. I've been an engineering manager at Doctolib since a couple of years, and I'm also a Ruby addict, so that's okay in the end. Okay, perfect. So we are Doctolib, a French and German company. We are quite young. We were born 6 years ago in 2013. And we grow quite fast. As of today, we have a 40 million user base. The company is included 1,000 persons in both France and Germany. And we do love Ruby, because our main product is a monolithic Rails application. And I think we can say that Rails and Ruby does scale. The thing is, at some point, like Thibaut expressed it earlier, some people predicted stack issues regarding the scalability of Ruby. But so far, there is none. No problem with the backend, no problem with the front end, and our main PostgreSQL database is going fine. The only real issue about the stack, it's the fact that some of our developers are fighting over Vim against Emacs. But as you all know, this is not a real issue because everybody knows that Vim is best. So, having no stack problem does not mean that we have no problem at all. Actually, since the last couple of years, we noticed a small but steady increase in the difficulty of maintaining existing software. It's nothing dramatic, nothing critical, but what could take you something like 10 days 2 years ago is going to take you 11 days today. It's not a big problem, but this is something we have to address, because if it goes on forever, at some point, we will no longer be able to manage our code base. So we decided to try to understand this increasing difficulty and to build some kind of model to know on which button we were able to press in order to get things getting better or at least not getting worse. So we settled for this. The difficulty to maintain our code base should be something like the knowledge we need to make it evolve times the knowledge we lost about it. You all know legacy code, which is some code of which you've lost knowledge at some point and you are no longer able to master it. It's kind of a thing, but... More concretely, at Doctolib, we decided to use the code base size and the turnover as two main KPIs of those two things. The bigger the code base size is, the more difficult it is to master it. When you have a small code base of a few thousand lines of code or a few hundreds lines of code, it's okay. You can browse in it and everything is fine. And the second thing is the amount of person leaving your company and taking the knowledge they have with them. This is not an issue at Doctolib. We have quite no turnover issue as of today. We have more a new joiner issue, but we'll come back to this later, and we call that knowledge dilution. Instead, I'd like to focus first on the code base size. Does any of you know this man? This man is Rajveer Meena. He holds the record for the most memorized decimal places of P. That guy spent 10 hours reciting decimal places of pi. He managed to remember 70,000 of them. I am barely able to remember 4 phone numbers. It's quite a feat. So at some point, we have to ask ourselves, could Rajveer save us? Well, not so sure, because our code base contains something like 220,000 lines of code. So knowing that the average line of code at Doctolib is something like 34, 35 cars, if we were to try to store this code base in Rajveer's brain, we would need something like 106 Rajveers. So, perfect, let's do that. They're onboarding Doctolib on next Monday. So, what are we going to do, Melanie?
Well, obviously, we are not going to hire 106 Rajveers. But however, each month we welcome between 2 to 4 new developers. And half of them, they may not know anything about Ruby when they arrive. So our challenge is to help them grow and make them autonomous in less than 3 months. This is Lisbeth. She's a new joiner. She is a full-stack developer, and she doesn't know anything about Ruby, just like me when I arrived. Lisbeth, with all the other new joiners, is going to start at Doctolib by going back to school, what we call our own school, the Doctolib Academy. First, she's going to start learning things about the company, the values, the missions. And then, for 1 week, she will start learning things about tech, but very generic information. After that, like probably in most companies, Lisbeth will be joining her team, and she will start by doing a lot of pair programming. Maybe a little bit too much in her opinion. But anyway, pair programming is good, it helps her grow. But this is not what we use to help her grow on the stack. To help her grow on our code base and on the stack, we use a special mentoring program that we call Starsky and Hutch. Basically, every week, Lisbeth will meet with her mentor, and they will talk about coding, things like that. They will meet for 1 hour. First, they will talk about the basics. Ruby 101, Rails 101, React 101. After that, they will start talking about other things. The database, migration, performances, tools, New Relic, Sentry, security, pretty much all these subjects. And once they've done that, they will start talking about functional scopes. For example, how on the patient website did we implement the search bar? How does it work? Another example, how did we implement the availability service? So the service that computes availability times for doctors. So with her Starsky and Hutch, Lisbeth is going to discover more and more things on the code base. And after a couple of months, she will be done with it. And what is great about Starsky and Hutch is that it scales amazingly. At the beginning of a session, you have 1 mentor and 1 new joiner. A couple of months later, you get 2 mentors, able to take 2 new joiners to start learning again. This helped us to grow from 20 developers to 70. So it worked great. And the more developers we had, the more tools we needed. A good example of a tool that really helped us for new joiners is Stack Overflow for Team. It's basically Stack Overflow, but with private questions. And this is really helpful for new joiner. When they arrive, they have always the same questions about how do you run a test, I have this error, what does it mean, etc. And people can go there, look for the answer. And what is great about it is that we already have lots of questions, around 300, 350. But also, when someone asks a new question, he gets an answer in less than 13 minutes, in average. So that's really cool for a new joiner. Thanks to that, thanks to Stack Overflow, thanks to Starsky and Hutch, developers are able to be autonomous in less than 3 months. And people like Lisbeth are really happy. Now, let's move into the future. Let's go 6 months later. Lisbeth is now a fully integrated developer, and she starts working on pretty big pull requests. As part of her job, she has to do a big refactoring on a model that is used by every team. Let's take, for example, the appointment model, the worst ever. Now she's going to face the second biggest challenge of the knowledge management. How can she share information about her refactoring and the decisions her team took to all the developers? To do that, we decided that she should first share it orally, at a presentation, for example. We organize once every 2 weeks a tech time, where every developer can share coding tips, information about Rails, problems they encountered in their teams, downtime, how they fix them, pretty much everything. And what is good about the tech time is that first it's more striking, you remember it better, you always remember the person that mentioned something. And then the good thing is that at the end of a presentation, you can always go back to the slides and look for the links and the documentation. So that's great. Another very positive aspect of it is that when Lisbeth shares her story, she gets some recognition from the other developers, and this helps her grow in the company. So she's really happy about it. But of course, the tech time isn't perfect. It has some limits. And Alex experienced it a couple of months ago, and I'm going to let him share this story with you.
Yeah, sure. I love tech time. It's kind of a corporate meetup with free beer, so what's not to love about it? The thing is, I missed one. And this tech time was the one where somebody explained that we were to no longer use Rails default scope for specific motives we could discuss later on with a coffee. But the thing is, I used one because I was not aware that we should no longer use them at Doctolib. And I sent it in my pull request, got an approval, merged it, sent it to the master branch, and it went to production, which is okay. It does not broke anything. But the thing is, the duty person, which is a developer in charge of pushing to production at Doctolib every day, it's a different person every day. This person noticed this default scope and talked about it to a teammate. And another person, an engineering manager of another team, was just close to them and heard them talk about it. And at some point, the second person left a comment on my closed pull request, and the EM went to another team to discuss with 2 other persons about it. And next, he came to my team to discuss to me, but did not find me. So he talked to 2 other developers of my team about it. Are you seeing where I'm going here? And the thing is, at some point, the information got to me. So I built another pull request, which was validated by something like 4 other persons, and it went to production, and all was fine. Or was it?
6 developers, 12 interruptions. 1 interruption, it's between 5 to 30 minutes of time to refocus on your work. So this makes approximately 3 hours of development time lost. And the problem of this is that it doesn't scale. Today it's 3 hours, tomorrow it's 15, and in 1 week it's even more. So we had to find a better solution. Our solution, we tried to think about it, was actually to start using Ruby and automation. Our first idea is that, in the example of Alex, we wanted to ping directly developers when they were going to introduce a new code that did not respect the decision that we took. And how did we want it to ping them? Directly on their pull request. So we created a solution called Gotchas that is just a simple Ruby class test that will check at your diff on your pull request, and if it sees certain keywords in certain files, it will ping you to prevent you that maybe you will impact something. Here in this example on the left, you can see that we will look for cookies word in all the controllers. This is the good thing about this is that it works great, and it's really easy to add a new gotcha based on the model. But the downside is that it is so easy to add a gotcha that maybe we have too many of them right now. We have around 30 of them, and this sometimes when you create a pull request, you just have 5 to 10 comments about it. And as a developer, you can feel it at a little bit of spam. The other downside of this is that it's not blocking. So if you just don't read the comments or you just ignore them because you're going fast, it won't prevent you from merging code that may have an impact in production. So we had to go a little bit further. And in the example of the default scope, what we ask ourselves is, do we want developer to be able to create some code that contains a default scope? No. So what we did is that we defined some custom Robocop cop, and we associated them to a pre-commit hook. So basically, every time you try to commit some code that contains the default scope, it won't work. You won't be allowed to. This works great. So far, we have been having 5 custom cop, mostly about tests and the way you write integration tests in the company, but also about default scope. So this is a good solution, and it's a little bit harder to write one, so maybe in the future we'll have some more. But anyway, thanks to that, thanks to the pre-commit hook, to the gotcha and the take time, people like Lithbeth are able to share the knowledge they have and make sure everyone knows it. And now it's time to talk about the third challenge of knowledge management. The third challenge is what happens when the knowledge is gone. Not necessarily because people leave the company, but mostly because some people worked on a project and then they changed teams and then a new team took it back and worked on it and again and again and again. And at the end, you don't know what's happening anymore. I'll let Alex explain you what we do in that case.
And now, this is the time where Melanie is fearing that I might start to sing "Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone." So, don't worry, I won't do that. You should all thank me. What to do when knowledge is lost? Brittany, yesterday you talked about a class of tools that I really love and I've been using since a few years. You talked about GitHub Scientist, which is a great framework when you are not sure what you're going to do when you send your code in production. So to just give you a little bit more of context, you know that we have 40 million of users, and last summer at Doctolib, we had to deeply change our user account data model to enable some new product evolutions. So changing a data model with account, user, patient, when you have 40 million of them, while not breaking anything, it's not an easy feat. But to do that, we did help ourselves with some kind of framework like Scientist. Let's go back to Lithbeth, and let's imagine that she has to change this code to no longer use this specific access control way of doing things to this one. Seems pretty straightforward. The only thing is that we have no idea when we are pushing this thing to production if it's going to work or not. The thing is, we are pretty confident about it's going to work because we have a test suite of 13,000 tests, something like that, with lots of integration tests and so on. But let's say, for the sake of confidence, that we don't want to take leap of faith. So to achieve this and checking that in any cases, those 2 bits of codes return the same thing, we are using a library that we developed at Doctolib, which is called DL Experiment. It's open source, so you can check it on our repository. Feel free to open issues or contribute to it if you'd like. We'd be really happy about that. The thing is, if you want to check what happens, by using this, you can compare the results of both old and new implementations. And if at any point in time in your test suite, those 2 snippets of code does not return the same thing, it will raise an exception and allow you to detect that it's not working 100% of time in the same way than it used to be. So this is about tests, but what if we push this to production? Nothing will happen, because in production, to get a few things out of this, you had to use this helper, the onDiff callback, which is called anytime you don't have the same results in your legacy and experimental code. The good thing about this is, unlike scientists, you don't have to define a single publication strategy with a single backend for all your experiments. You can go for it and use any backend you'd like. For example, if you have access to logs, you can use logs. If your error should be only an exceptional thing, you could send it to New Relic and Sentry and build a dashboard out of it. And if it's more something where you want to converge and flip the switch once you are at, let's say, 60, 30, 80% of similarities, you could go for your own tracking event data model, and once things are OK, flip it. So that's it. It's the way we do when we really know how those behave our code in production, which, when you have so many code base with so many lines, happens quite often. And that's it. So, ultimately, to wrap up, we'd like you to keep at least those three things. First, accept that you can't know everything. After all, even Rajveer can't, so it's OK. Don't guess or assume. Instead, measure things. There is an old carpentry proverb that says, measure twice, cut once. It's the same thing. You have all the tools that you can use to test things in production or measure in production. Go for it. And ultimately, don't overload your teammates' brain. Use Ruby. By use Ruby, I mean use automation, but really use Ruby. Thank you so much for your attention. We are Melanie and Alex. You can get more technical content from our DoctoTech Live newsletter. What question do you have for us? We have one.
Sure, sir.
What if I want to do an experiment with an operation that involves a transactional database?
This is the limit of the thing. Even with scientists, you don't want to create 2 users during a subscription, so you don't do that. You could still try while declaring a transaction and rolling it back and checking some kind of result, maybe the success of the transaction. But ultimately, the cost in performance of added rollback transaction in your flow, it's probably not so interesting regarding what you are going to get out of this. So mostly use scientist, GitHub Scientist Experiment and Suture, which is another Ruby framework for doing such kind of things, mostly with functional code. That's the only downside of the thing.
And do junior developers know that?
Actually, we kind of double check on this, and you just made me think to add a gotcha about it. Thanks. Yep.
Since you said that you missed the tech time, there was no way for you to get a record of that?
We do have a record of it, but people don't necessarily think to watch it after. But now we've been starting to send a recap at the end of the tech time by mail. We've been doing that for 1 week, and we'll see if it works.
Like
that could be a good way.
A Slack reminder or something like this, or whatever tool you use.
Sorry, what?
Like a a Slack reminder or
Yeah,
whatever
that could
tool
be.
you use for chatting?
We kind of use Slack, but this is not the communication channel to go for communication we don't want to lost. So it's mostly about emails for us. But it's a thing we started to do really recently, which has been working really well because it allows to share all takeaways in a really quick email. And we hope that it will make custom Rubocop rules less important.
How do you track the knowledge inside your company? Because, I mean, some people can have knowledge, for example, for the appointment module, but then leave to another team, which has another objectives.
Yes.
And then the bugs come.
That's-
So how do you track it? Do you have a matrix? How do you do it?
Yeah, we have several levels of knowledge matrix. We have a first one, which is the functional level, where any functional concept in the company, like appointments, like booking an appointment, like handling a patient identity, all those things are assigned to specific teams because we are feature teams with a huge focus on a main KPI, and it's mostly a functional focus. But this is not helping in 100% of the case. That's why we have two other kind of more fine matrices. One which assign files to teams. So it's not perfect because sometimes files are owned by several teams, but all in all, it's working okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.